Welcome to Unstoppable Podcast with Harry Sardinas, inspiring conversations with influential millionaires, investors, thought leaders, entrepreneurs who are making a massive difference with their innovative products and services, and sharing the challenges and wisdom of how they sold their first million.
How would you like to make your first millions? And today we have as a guest Dom Einhorn, which is the founder of Intelligent Games. So Dom, tell us, what are the 5 steps to make your first million?
Well, thank you for having me, Harry. Pleasure to be on the show. I'd say the first step, which most people probably recognize themselves in, is start with 0. The old joke is, what's the easiest way to make a million? Well, start with 2, and you lose, and you lose half. So that's not what we would recommend to most people, because they don't have 2 to begin with. When you're starting with 0, you cannot fall any lower, right? Absolutely. You basically draw a baseline. You're also grounded because 0 is level.
It's 0.
Right? Underneath, who cares what's underneath? You're not going to fall underneath because you're on strong footing. And now you only got to wait. Now you only got to go. You only have to go up, right? Not down. I think it's important because it puts you in the here and the now. And it's impossible to imagine how to go from 0 to a million unless you know exactly where you are today. Whether that's flat 0, whether that is 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, 500,000, if you want to go to a million, right? Just don't start with 2. Okay? So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, again, it's different for every person. So what I'm conveying right now is my own experience from actually making it happen. The rule number 2, I would say, is focus and discipline. And these 2 character qualities go hand in hand. They don't mean the same thing, but they're certainly in parallel. Focus means that you're able to push everything aside, your Netflix when you have to at 9 p.m. Mm-hmm. You're able to put aside even your family at times to make your goal of achieving that million or that business idea the absolute priority in your life. The discipline is similar yet different. The discipline is basically what helps you stay on track and what keeps you focused for a long period of time. It's very easy to be focused, for most people at least. A lot of them have ADD, myself included at times. It's very easy to get focused for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe even an hour. But to maintain that focus throughout a day, throughout a week, through a month, a year, or multiple years. We only hear about the success stories, and we call them overnight stories. Well, most of my overnight stories took 10 to 20 years to build, right? Yeah. That's my overnight success story, right? Wow, Dom, you're so lucky. Well, thank you very much. Depends how you define luck, right? Yeah. Then third, being an entrepreneur and being a driven personality means that you are 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, 1 in a million. You are unique because not everybody is like that. Not everybody is meant to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody has what it takes to say, I can forget about everything else. This is my goal. I'm going to dedicate my entire being to making it happen, right? Now, we're still human at the end of the day. What you do need is you need support. You don't want to be lonely, right? In my case, look, I got my wife bringing me a cup of coffee while I'm there. And it's those little things. I don't have to get up. I can keep focused. She knows that. She knows exactly how I am, right? To some people, that means nothing. To me, it means the world. I didn't have to get outside of my zone, push a button.
Take you 20 minutes to focus back again. That happened to me.
100% happens to everyone. That's just how our inefficient human minds work, right? We get sidetracked and we're coming back to focus and discipline. All of this needs to be in lockstep. So number 4, which is very similar to number 3, right, to number 2, sorry, about focus and discipline, is to always stay on track. And this may sound like a broken record, but never give up. When you give up, you relinquish control.
Mhm.
In order to succeed, you have to be in control at all times.
Mhm.
So if you make the conscious decision to give up on your journey, that means you're no longer in control of your destiny. Someone else's or other circumstances around will dictate what does happen to you.
Mhm.
I refuse to let that happen in my life. I refuse to not be the captain of my boat. I refuse to just go willy-nilly and say, okay, here are the keys. You drive, whether you're drunk or not, and I'm just sitting and waiting and see what happens. Now, if
Well,
that's the life you want to live,
very
I'm
inspiring.
not going to interject, but I personally refuse to do so. And I think that every driven entrepreneur should refuse to do so. No one knows about your journey as well as you do, and no one will ever care about your journey as much as you do. That's a given. Don't expect other people to share your aspirations or to even care for them. They have their own lives, they have their own aspirations, or may not have any aspirations. Who cares? What matters is you. So you have to be, to a certain degree, you have to be a little bit selfish and think about you first. The same way when you're taking an airplane, for those who have taken an airplane before, when you're putting on your seatbelt and the captain comes on the air, first thing he tells you is what? Your safety first. If you're sitting with an infant, put on your mask in case of a catastrophe. You put on your mask first, and then to your children next to you. Now, some people are shocked when they hear that, but think about it.
Yeah.
If you cannot take care of yourself, how can you take care of your loved ones?
100%.
Right. And then last and not least, that's a little bit more out of the ordinary. It's a little bit more of like what's been my personal secret sauce to defining success and achieving success is the importance of being a specialist and not a generalist.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at doctors. There's generalists, house doctors, family doctors, and there's specialists. Which ones make more money?
Yes,
the specialists.
Specialists.
Right? Let's forget about the money. Which one is more qualified in his field? The specialist, right? So when you're thinking about making money, think about who are you going to be selling your product or your service to, and what are they looking for? Are they looking for a catch-all, or are they looking for someone who is extremely proficient in one extremely specific subject matter? It's the latter, and that's why they're willing to pay for it, right? If you want to have a top dog securities attorney, for those of you in stocks and bonds or whatnot, well, some of them go for $2,500 an hour, right? A general attorney goes for 10 times less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
U.S. figures, right? Obviously varies by country. So those would be my 5, go-to strategies, go-to mental frame-up in order to make it happen.
Well, Dom, that's amazing. And I think that it reminds me, I love your first step because it's so true. And it's so helpful. I remember when I started my first property company, we managed to sell over 5 million. And we were renting properties, fixing them out and rent the rooms individually. And I remember I didn't have the money to rent the first property. So I went to the bank and I was making £5.95, I think, pounds per hour there in London because I was a waiter back then. And I was thinking, so the bank only can lend me 3K because I was not making more money than that. So that was enough to rent the first property. And I remember in my way back, someone asked me for money, like, the beggar, like, can you give me some money? And I saw the guy and I was thinking, I say, I'm worse than this guy because this guy at least has 0. I have minus. I own 3K to the bank that if this business doesn't work, I was calculating. And I'm like, man, for pay back this 3K at the rate of $5.95 per hour that I was making in London would take me maybe 10 years to pay that. But it was the best thing because when you have 0, you have to be very careful with your money because if it's gone, it's gone.
And an
You
important,
have to be very, very, and that comes to your second step, the other step that you share a lot, that was about focus and discipline. My focus was survival. I had to be focused. It was that step number one that you said, that zero, that it was no way back. I had to make it work. I had to be focused. I was focused. I have attention disorder. Yeah, I'm a visual person, so I get distracted very easy. But I remember those years were the years that more focused I was in my life, because
no choice.
but I started like that. I started with zero, no, with minus 3K. So I think it's really powerful. And let me ask you a question, Dom, about some companies or tech entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in general out there, that they want to develop the product and then they have a job in the side, and now they start to bootstrap and to spend out the money from the family, from friends, and developing the product that they think that the market want to buy. And obviously, after they spend all these resources, they patent this amazing product. And after they sold the house, they sold the parents' house, and they ask all their friends as much money they can, they create this amazing product, patented, bulletproof, that then they take it to market, nobody wants to buy. What advice do you have for those entrepreneurs?
So the advice is to exactly not do what you just described. And what I mean by that, let me be a lot more specific than that, because it's something that I see with a lot of my clients doing, of putting a lot of effort, a lot of money into developing a product or service, and then realizing, oh, there is no product market fit. Nobody wants to buy it, right? If you have
start, a lot, very common.
Happens all the time. It's human nature to do that. So what you do in order to avoid that trap, because it is a trap,
absolutely,
is you start with your concept. You conceptualize prior to expending a lot of money. Let's say you have a product. You start with a drawing, the basic functionality, which is only cost you your time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to go see your most likely target candidate who would buy that, a potential client. And you get feedback. Assuming you tell them this, assuming I can deliver this product and it has these functionalities and they work. Number one, what would you be willing to buy it? And number two, what pain point does it solve and how much is that worth to you, which is going to give you your market price.
Absolutely.
Right? So again, you do this before you go way down the road of investing incredible resources into developing a product or service. Because 9 times out of 10, when you do that, you turn around, it's like, oh my God, just wasted all this time, all this effort, all this money, and I don't have a market.
100%. Yeah.
So another important thing for those entrepreneurs who are in the service business, so no products, which includes myself. I have clients that sell products. I'm not a product guy. I use them, but it's not my business. In the service business, you can actually go one important step further. And that important step is obviously you want to scale, right? So rather than scaling before you have product market fit, find out what the lowest common denominator of your service is. One individual application, right? So I'll give you a very concrete example because that's what we do today. So Intelligent Games runs a quiz platform. That quiz platform I had started in 2005, put it on hold because I was sidetracked by other projects. And I basically reinvented it about 1.5 years ago. Today, it's got close to 250,000 downloads, a lot of activity, a lot of players. But instead of just going in head first and just building out this platform with hundreds of thousands of quizzes, what did we do? I took a step back and we said, how can we break this down to the lowest common denominator? The lowest common denominator was one quiz on one topic. Then we were looking at, okay, if ultimately we want to sell advertising against that quiz and marketing placement. Number one, can we get an audience around that quiz? Number two, how cheap can we acquire that audience for? Right? And we did tests, multiple iterations. I think the first quiz we had ever done was a Clint Eastwood quiz.
Wow.
So we went out. I'm a Clint Eastwood fan. Don't hold it against me. Dirty Harry. So we went out.
Me too, me too.
On social media, if you go to Facebook, for example, you have probably 1,000 Clint Eastwood groups, fan pages, and whatnot. And we started for free at no cost. I'm still talking zero cost right now, promoting that quiz organically. And we got incredible traction. Now, we didn't immediately come back and say, okay, let's go do $1 million. Okay, we have now proof of concept for one single quiz on one topic.
Let's analyze. Yeah.
We did 5, we did 10, we did 20, we did 50, we did 100. And after a few hundred, we said, pedal to the metal. This is working.
Now we got it.
Now we got it. Now we know we can get an audience. And we also know at the end of the day, once you get the eyeballs, and they're so specific, because when you're talking about quizzes, you can create quizzes on any topic in any language under the sun. And it's so darn specific that you can create, even if I don't have it yet, anything that comes to your mind right now, I can reverse engineer it and build a quiz around it. The quiz is very engaging. It's educational. So let's say aloe vera, to pick a product, skincare product, right? Which I use occasionally. We have an aloe vera quiz. Now, if you're an aloe vera marketer or advertiser, where would you like to be today?
Absolutely.
Yes, you can go on Google AdWords and you can share one little spot with one little line with 500 other aloe vera advertisers. Or you can be a unique advertiser on the aloe vera quiz that has 20 questions that people answer, learn about the product, what the applications are, et cetera, and your brand carries along all the way as a sponsor to that quiz.
Very powerful. Very good.
And we can do that on 1 billion topics.
Wow.
So over the next 18 months, our goal is to actually have a quiz for every Wikipedia entry.
Wow.
which means about 70 million as of yesterday.
Community, yeah. That's amazing.
So think about, because our natural way of searching today, if we're looking for a topic, for a generic topic, we typically Google it. And then there's a good chance that we're going to end up on Wikipedia, right? We watch a movie on Netflix. We want to learn more about when was that director, when was that actor born, where did he go to school, right? Blah, 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 boom. We're on Wikipedia in 2 seconds. But imagine having a tool where you can self-assess your knowledge about any topic that is on Wikipedia. How much do I know about anything?
Yeah.
Right? In brackets. And that is what we intend to deliver at scale with Masters of Trivia.
That's amazing. And for business, it's really powerful, because you can even assess yourself. What is your strength and what are your weakness? So don't tell us, because you speak the way you speak, yeah, this doesn't seem that this was your first business. So once you decide to become an entrepreneur, and what was your first business? What was the reaction of your family? Are your parents entrepreneurs or not? Did they thought that you were crazy? They support you? Tell us a little bit about these beginnings.
Well, my parents thought I was crazy, and they were right. I am crazy. You have to be crazy.
Absolutely.
To do what we do.
Do what we do. Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you're not, you have to be like. There's a lot of people think they're entrepreneurs, but let's be honest, many of them are not. Right? You're much better off as an employee. If you're hesitating, if you're asking 50 questions before you get started, that already means there's nothing wrong about that. We need doctors, we need teachers, we need athletes, we need everything. Absolutely. Right? And we need entrepreneurs. But unless you will know whether you have what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur or not. If you need help to get up in the morning, if you need to be told, hey, you need to work after 5 p.m., right? If you need to be told, hey, it's time for lunch right now, you need to eat first. Those are nays, right?
Or I need one day off. I need my day off. I'm like, man.
A long weekend.
Yeah.
So the definition of a long weekend for me is no distraction, and I get more work done than during the week. That's the definition of a long weekend.
Yeah.
Right? So to answer your question directly, the if you have Texan listeners, the term in Texas that they use for someone that is not on their first venture, they tell, this is not your first rodeo.
Yeah.
I think that's,
I can tell that this is not your first rodeo for the
it's a great metaphor, because think about it, right? It means that you didn't fall off the horse for the first time. This is so important, and you don't find it in other languages. Like, I'm in France, right? I speak French fluently. I'm assuming you speak Spanish. I speak Spanish.
Yes.
I speak German.
Wow.
Deutsch ohne Problem, natürlich auch, ja.
My goodness, Lord. Wow.
But there's not, the equivalent does not exist of something so visual. This is not my first rodeo. Let that sink in. It means that I've fallen off the horse so many times, and I went back on every single time after breaking my shoulder, after breaking my leg, and I said, I'm going to master this horse, right? And now I'm beating the horse. The horse is giving up before I do. It's not kicking me off. So powerful to actually do this, right? So my parents were not entrepreneurs. My father was a government employee, worked for the French railways. My mom was a pastry chef early on, and then a houseman. So it doesn't matter where you're from, right? I was like lower middle class. I grew up as a lower middle class guy. And actually, one of the things that pushed me is I saw him struggle financially. And in the back of my mind, I said, I never want to be like that. I'm going to do whatever it takes to not be like that, of having to fight about a bill, right? Which at the time to me seemed like a big bill, but today I look at it, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe that, right? Like whatever the equivalent may be today, a $50 power bill or something like that, right? Wow. And having an argument about an hour about it, how are we going to pay for this? So I grew up with that, right? So when you see that struggle and you see that the impact it has on your loved ones, the first thing you want to do is like figure out what you can do to help them. And as a child, you're helpless. You're not even legally allowed to work. That's the first thing I wanted to do. I wanted to get at 8, I wanted to get a job to help alleviate the pain. What can I do? Well, you're not allowed to work until you're 16 in France, right? I'm not sure what it is now. It's probably 18 or 25. Who knows, right? Because working is a big offense in a lot of countries, right? Don't work too much. So that's my life story. You know, I grew up with a chip on my shoulder, and I still have it.
But when the inspiration came from them, how do you knew that if you become an entrepreneur, you can become
a lot of reading,
wealthy, a lot of reading? So any particular book, any particular TV show? What happened? Because you were alone. It's not like your parents told you become an entrepreneur.
No.
So like my parents, they were teachers. All they would tell me all my life is go to university, study a lot, and you're gonna be fine. So I got to university. I never exercised as chemical engineer to my university. I haven't used it at all for nothing, only to keep my dad and mom happy for 5 years. But so
growing up,
that's what they advised me. So you in your house, you saw that your dad and your mom, they have a job, right? So it didn't come from home. So from where? Where do you read? What happened?
So number one, I started reading at a very early age. And when I turned about 8 or 9 years old, I started reading 3 books a week. Now, very early on, I became a huge fan of a French writer called Jules Verne, what Americans would call Jules Verne, who wrote 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, From Here to the Moon, et cetera, et cetera. I'm translating literally right now some of the titles. So he was one of the pioneering science fiction writers, right? And what really got me thinking about this is, oh my God, everything is possible, right? Especially when I learned that most of what he predicted 150 years ago became true. Actually was realized. Rockets to the moon, right? Submarines. And he had the drawings, the mock-ups of everything. For me, that was the ultimate entrepreneur before I even knew what an entrepreneur was. So it's not science fiction, because what appears to be science fiction became reality. So here is one individual, one writer, who came up with these crazy stories in his life, hence the crazy. Everybody called him crazy, right? This could never happen. He's stuff flying around and going from here to the moon. Never. Think about it. in the mid 19th century, mid to late 19th century. There's no chance. Yet it happened. So the foresight of actually being able to conceptualize and visualize some very powerful ideas in your mind, first and foremost, and make them possible, it's bar none. I mean, that's the core definition of an entrepreneur. I read every single book, I think 140 or so, that Jules Verne wrote, some of them 2 or 3 times.
Wow, that's what your role models, yeah?
That was one role model. I had a second role model, which was my grandmother, maternal grandmother, who was a World War II veteran, who lost most of her family in the war. And, you know, I had 2 brothers, 5 or 6 years older than me. And she was literally, because my parents were busy and working, so she was literally with me the entire time and shaped me. And basically shaped me in a way of no BS, straight talk, always be direct, even if you ruffle somebody's feathers. Always be true to yourself. I mean, she was the epitome of what you would call an honest to earth person that just straight talk. And I had that at a very, when I was young, very young, 2, 3 years old. She says, look, she called me son, even though it was her grandson. I'm going to talk to you like an adult, because if I talk to you like a child, you're not going to benefit from what I'm going to tell you. Right? And the life stories that she gave was very powerful. I mean, I literally, by the time I was 10 or 11 years old, I was an adult.
Wow.
And I very early on, as a result of that, gravitated to people that were older than me, because I had a very hard time relating to people of my age. I would go play soccer with them and all the good stuff. But beyond that, I literally had very little in common. I went back to my books and I went back to my grandma.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I think that the power of and what gave you this passion for reading? You really like it to read, or because usually kids, we don't like to read.
That's right. So I had
something me all the time. Read the book, and
yeah.
So
here's the key with reading. This is not from me. This is from a history and geography professor that I had in middle school. Mm-hmm. He noticed in the 80s there was a lot of kids that had trouble reading, trouble focusing. And he gave us a metaphor, still with me today. He said, not reading is like being caught in a spider web. It's very uncomfortable, right? So what you have to do, you have to get rid of the webs around you. And the way you get rid of the webs around you is you don't sit down and you start reading a book. You read 1 page. And then you read 1.5 pages. Then you read 2 pages. You break through the webs. Wow. until you're out of them. Before you know it, you're out and you can read an entire book. Now, I was never in those spider webs, but I had a lot of friends who were in those spider webs who said, I could never do this, who tried it, and today are reading more than I do.
Oh, wow. Amazing. But Dom, I think that, it's also about the mindset. Somehow it was, we all entrepreneurs, we have in our genes. Whenever sometimes it doesn't come from family, so we have it within us that one day we're gonna do something amazing, and we're gonna help the people that we love with what we do. This is within us, and I think because you have this mindset, this positivity within you, then if the teacher says something about reading, then you're gonna read more books.
It reinforces it. Yeah.
You were always searching because. At the bottom it has this drive of you to find the way out, to find the best way out, and in those books, very, very like.
So I can tell you, it's definitely not genetic, because I have 2 brothers.
Yeah.
One of them unfortunately passed away in an accident. He was very entrepreneurial. Wow. And I have a second one who is an artist, an opera singer, who is the least bit entrepreneurial, yet we share the same genes.
Yeah.
And we're completely different. So it's not genetic.
It's not, definitely.
It's potentially cultural. I think a lot of it has to do with culture, the way you're being brought up, what your circle of influence looks like. My circle of influence was different than my older brothers, right? Mm-hmm. Because of the presence the ever presence of my maternal grandmother and how she basically impacted my life. And then I grew up in a very, very small town of 400 people in northeastern France, where aside from playing soccer, there wasn't much to do. So
good food also.
Excellent food. And so you eat, your tummy is full. What are you going to do now, right? Some people will take a nap. I decided to grab a good book and to read from cover to cover.
Wow, amazing.
So a lot of it has to do with circumstances. So when you're looking, for example, about, the story of the great salespeople, some of them grew up as hustlers because they had no choice. They were street vendors. They were selling newspapers to make a living, right? Some of them didn't even have a mom or a dad. They had to survive on the streets. So obviously that culture, that ecosystem breeds a different personality and a different human being than someone who has everything handed to them on a platter.
And then, Dom, let's come back about this. This is not my first rodeo, because sometimes we have tech companies that are looking for funding out there, and we often hear the venture capitalists tell the founders, come and see me in your next idea. And the founders are always looking at me and say, Harry, what this guy is telling me?
I can tell you.
The money now? Why he's not giving me the money now? Why he's telling me come back in your next idea? And I'm trying to tell them, look, I know that you don't understand what I'm trying to tell you, but he needs that you have more than one rodeo, because you're yet not thinking like an entrepreneur. By the way you talk, by the question, by how you answer, you can smell exactly, Dom, like when I ask you about the 5 million, you finish in 10 seconds. I'm asking you, how come you managed to do it so quickly? I said, well, it's get easy if you actually done it. So the same thing with the business, right? With the entrepreneurs, we believe that entrepreneurship is a skill, and you were talking about luck, it took 20 years or whatever. I think it takes time to everyone, because we all have to develop a skill.
Yeah, look, I mean, so
the more you practice, the better you become. There is no, I mean, you that have wrote a lot of books, that read a lot of books, do you know all the way around for entrepreneurship, or you believe that it's just a skill like driving or like swimming, that the more you practice, the better you become?
100%. 100%, that's what it is. Now, to go back to the point that you made about the situation of an entrepreneur, tech or other, trying to raise money, the reality is, the reason why it's so darn difficult to raise money, because thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people are trying to raise money, are pitching the same people you're pitching at all times, right? So to be able to break through the noise is extremely difficult. That's number one. Number two, if somebody tells you, come back and see me whenever, that reminds me of when I was a salesperson in the late 80s, early 90s, before the internet. And when you were pitching them or something, and they would tell you, can you send me a fax, please? That means get lost, right? That's an easy way. It's a diplomatic way of getting rid of you on the phone. And the investor is doing the same thing. If an investor gives you a maybe later, that means he will never invest. Don't waste your time chasing that person down, because your time is valuable, right? Now, the key is this. If you look at the most successful businesses, I'm not talking about Uber, Stripe, eBay, PayPal. If you actually study their history, and you study Alibaba probably being the most prominent one of all of them, of how many investors they had to pitch in order to get $1, you would never even begin unless you have what it takes, right? It is a long and arduous journey, even if you have the best business model on earth.
The best product,
So the reason why it seems so simple is because all of us are accustomed to going to TechCrunch.com and reading a headline that these 10 companies just raised 50 million euros today, right? Yeah, they did, most likely. But they are one fish in a huge pond of millions of fish. And nobody's talking about all the ones. If we were talking about all the ones that tried to raise funding and didn't get it, we would never finish reading, right? So that's a curated list of the 0.1% of all companies that actually made it. So we're coming back to, how do you do it? We'll go down the list. the 5 that we just did. You're starting with zero. You have zero money right now, right? Reality sets in. Okay, I want to raise whatever number of money. Where am I today? Gratitude. Okay, at least I know where I am at. Where do I intend to go to? Well, I tend to raise 1 million pounds, dollars, euros, whatever it is. Okay, so now goal post here, goal post here. How I'm going to get there? Well, in order to get there, it probably makes sense to not zigzag from one way to another, because the fastest way is from point A to point B. So I need focus and discipline, right? Number 3, can I do this alone? Maybe, but chances are, if you're not alone, it's going to be easier to get from point A to point B. Number 4, do I get sidetracked? Ideally not. Stay on track and never give up, never turn back. Otherwise, you're never going to go where you want to go. Sounds common sense, sounds so logical, but a lot of people do exactly what I'm describing right now. And then last but not least, be a specialist. If it's a point A to point B race and there is no hurdles between point A and point B, don't invent them. Run your track. If it's a mile, become proficient at running a mile. If it's 100 miles, run a marathon, an ultra marathon, and train to run that ultra marathon, right? But don't take some stilts or some hurdles or a tricycle to try to get there. It's not going to work.
Absolutely. Dom, so tell us a little bit more about your product, and how your product can help to entrepreneurs.
So the product that we have is very specific. Be a specialist. I'm coming back to this. What we try to identify is a service in the market. Most of your listeners are probably familiar with the term SaaS, software as a service.
Absolutely.
And what's been shocking to myself and to my team for many, many years is that this is a very successful business endeavor that thousands of companies have utilized, raising money and becoming very successful on the sales side. And we were always wondering, how come the equivalent doesn't exist in the marketing space? How come that need that every single business has to market itself, to brand itself, doesn't have the same or a similar methodology to get the job done? So we coined the term MAS, marketing as a service. In order to do MAS, we devised a platform, the intelligent game platform, MastersofTrivia.com, which is, again, the repository of tens of thousands and soon millions of quizzes about any topic that allows any business, whether it sells a product or service, something tangible or intangible, to market itself as a service and to have exclusivity on that specific topic for as long as they decide to stick with it. So they're basically saying, look, I have a lot of options when it comes to promoting myself. I can do Facebook ads, I can do Google ads, I can do TikTok and everything else. I can do online and offline. Great. But how are you going to be able to pinpoint your customer to the most granular level? Right? Someone, coming back to the aloe vera example we used earlier, somebody playing an aloe vera quiz is probably pretty interested in aloe vera, or they wouldn't be answering 20 questions about aloe vera. Right? So how would you like to wrap your aloe vera brand around that topic and not share it with anyone else? This is now your turf. This is your brand for as long as you stick with it. Now, in terms of pricing, we've also needed to scale it to make it affordable to every purse, right? If we only had 10 or 100 quizzes, we would need to charge a lot more in order to offset our costs. So the idea was to get our unit economics down to the most granular level, as cheap as possible, so that we can sell it for a cheap price while still making a profit. And that's the key. So we had some initial discussions. One of the largest media buyers with Netflix is not a friend, but an acquaintance of mine. And what he was telling me early on, when I gave him, again, before building it, when I shared with him the general concept and the general idea before spending any money, he goes,
amazing,
look,
great idea.
yeah. The first thing he said, look, Dom, if you get 100,000 quizzes going, we're in. I said, okay, great piece of feedback. Okay, now I know where the goalpost is, 100,000 quizzes. My next question is, what makes you say so? So ask questions, right? And he goes, well, looking at what you're building, looking at all the topics you're going to be producing quizzes about, and comparing this to the Netflix portfolio of titles, we have one or more titles about every single one of those topics. So Dom, take your JFK quiz that you just showed me. We have, I don't remember what it was, 3, 4, 5, 6 JFK documentaries in there. So obviously it's very, very aligned with what Netflix wants to do, especially in geographies outside of the US, because in the US, they're not going to go that far anymore. They cannot sell 3 memberships to the same person, right? But in developing countries that are breaking into, especially countries like India and Latin America, where we're expanding to, there's room to roam, right? There is enough room there for Netflix to add over the next 5 years 1 billion new subscribers.
Yeah, wow.
And that's just Netflix. You could take any company with a lot of SKUs, a Walmart and Amazon. Imagine having a way where you can systematically, via the marketing as a service product. Okay. Otherwise, I have to call it marketing as a service. Doesn't sound too good. Having a highly targeted presence and driving traffic to a deep link on your website that's promoting that specific product service, right? So if I'm selling paper napkins, out of all things, I can actually produce a pretty engaging paper napkin quiz, right? And the questions in that quiz would be, what should you consider when purchasing a paper napkin, right? Allergens, right? Cleanliness, sturdiness, that doesn't break, all of the above, that would be a question, right? There's a lot of value that you can add to the merchant by asking the questions in a strategic way and driving awareness amongst the consumer that, oh, wow, I never even thought about that, right? I'm just using a napkin. Here, I'm pulling one out right here. This is just a regular napkin, right? But what if that napkin avoids allergens? What if that napkin kills COVID-19, Lord forbid, right? Or something similar. So the only unit of content anywhere that's flexible enough to accommodate any scenario, any topic in any language is a quiz. So in essence, what we're doing is we're turning the advertising world upside down or inside out as follows. Typically, when you're trying to pitch an advertiser, you have to show the advertiser that you have content that resonates with them and with their user base, number one.
100%.
Number two, you have to show that you have enough scale to get them interested. Number three, you have to show how this content and this audience will actually engage with their product or service. So you have all these hurdles to overcome. And that means you have to invest into building that machine first and foremost. So you're basically laying out the cash, laying out the effort, which is what we're saying you should not be doing earlier, in the hopes that you will find an advertiser that will offset all of those costs, plus pay you an additional fee so you can actually earn a profit. That's the traditional model. That's still the current model for any media entity, whether it's a magazine, a radio station, a TV station, a blog, a large website, et cetera, et cetera. So let's think about it differently. How can we, as entrepreneurs, launch a business where that problem doesn't exist? I don't have to put all that money out, all that effort first, and then maybe fail, right? Well, if we start first and foremost with what the goal and the objective of the advertiser is, before building anything, pick any advertiser. Give me an advertiser. Anyone that comes to your mind right now.
An advertiser. Okay, let's talk Netflix.
Okay, Netflix. Oh, Netflix. The first thing we'd look at. Okay, Netflix. Everybody knows it's a brand, so they probably don't need any help on branding, right? What are their strengths and weaknesses? Well, they're very, very strong in developed markets. and they're becoming strong in developing markets, but they're still not as strong as in large markets like the United States. There's still a lot of room to grow. One problem. Second problem that they have is that they have a very large inventory of titles, films, TV series, documentaries, but the obscure titles are watched a lot less than the big hits, the new show that's coming tonight, right? That's a problem for Netflix. They'd like to get more people watching.
And engage more time, yeah.
Yeah, so we've identified those two problems.
They want more people in the platform.
That's correct.
As longer as possible. They spend not only to watch one movie, but to
100%. That what Read Netflix said a few years ago is the biggest enemy to Netflix business model is sleep. Because we all need to sleep. So they basically want the longest engagement possible.
Absolutely.
How do you get that engagement? Well, with general branding, you get some engagement. People see your Netflix commercial on TV and they may buy a subscription. Granted, happens. Super Bowl, right? Mass media, all that, they can afford it, it works. But if you dig in deeper and you have a title, like they have so many serial killers, I'm not going to use that example right now on Netflix, but if you use a documentary about mental health, right? That is not something that
so many people will know that even this is there.
They have to specifically look for it.
Exactly.
And dig deeper, do a number of searches, look in the documentary section.
I'm always looking for business documentary, and I struggle a little bit.
So, perfect example.
Not easy to find.
So now imagine a tool, a marketing as a service tool comes along that gets traction, not only on the topic that you're interested in, but in the geography and in the language that you're interested in. Spanish, Hebrew, Somali, whatever the hell it is, right? And you now, via the social feeds that we built, you now land on the quiz. Oh, wow. Number one, it's 100% aligned with what you just saw on Facebook and Instagram or any other social network. So now you're playing on that very granular topic about how to launch a business. And it's brought to you by the How to Launch a Business in 30 Days on Netflix.
Wow.
The engagement rate is dramatic.
Amazing, yeah.
As a result of being so hyper-targeted and being so contextual to what your interest is, I need 100 to 1,000 times less impressions to get the same action or transaction.
Absolutely.
Because the conversion rate is sky high.
Yeah.
So what we're basically building is a machine that allows us
high conversion.
To accumulate those little nuclei of interests, but replicating them across 100 million topics.
I agree 100%. And there's always been the debate. I always argue with a lot of people that telling me online, well, Harry, if I put the name and email address in my landing page, I'm gonna get more subscribers. But if I ask more questions, I'm gonna have less subscribers. And I always telling them, look, the issue is that how come when you're gonna take a flight, you don't mind to put gazillion information? It's because you're very interested in that. You don't want to lose that flight, right? So when people, the people are actually engaged with the quiz and they are answering the quiz, and this is only mean one thing. They are really, really interested in what is going on.
And
that's why you have a high conversion. Absolutely,
sky high. We already measured that today. So the other thing is 100%.
I can tell because
the human mind is looking for continuity, right?
Exactly.
So if I'm doing a Google search, I usually don't stop there. I continue until my hunger is satisfied, until I get what I actually want, I actually need, right? So if you're looking at it as a content information funnel, the furthest down you can go is to the quiz level, where you can actually challenge how much you know or how much you don't know about a topic.
And whoever engaged is really, really interested about that topic. And in the end of the day, that's why we reflect the high conversion rate. I think that
Yeah.
a lot of people get confused, like in the end of the day, when we do this big event with Lily, my partner, we need to do a lot of advertising, and we use Facebook ads. One platform is Facebook ads, and I remember the type of ad that we use is conversion. Everybody was like me, telling me, Harry, but this conversion ad, they're the most expensive. Why are you using this? I said, look, because they convert. It's not about how much it costs at the end of the day.
How much are you getting out of it?
I need the conversion. So otherwise the people won't show up at the event. It's gonna be empty. So conversion is expensive, and that's why those platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and all of them, they charge more for this type of ad, because they know that somehow
they can afford to.
The level of engagement of this type of ad, people actually will show up, and the surveys are a huge way. Like I said, if you manage to get one person to engage with the piece of content and stay and answering all this and be active with it, you have a really, really high percentage that convert that client into buying your product or service, which is the holy grail.
Yeah.
In business and you're in marketing, let's speak truly. This is the holy grail of business, right? Try to put your product in front of people that actually want to buy it. When you achieve that, you have a really easy path to success. Dom, thank you so much. This conversation has been way more interesting than I thought. You're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You came well recommended. Yeah.
Oh, thank
Lily
you.
told me this guy is amazing, Harry. I'm like, what? Yeah, it will blow your mind. I'm like, so thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Harry.
And for all of you following this podcast on Unstoppable, see you in our next episode. How brave entrepreneurs like Dom break that wall and achieve the first million. Bye for now.
Follow us for more interviews with world's most influential, audacious entrepreneurs that overcame challenges and adversity, providing you with the blueprint of how they sold their first million so you can grow your business exponentially.